Well, hello and good morning. Welcome to another Sunday morning coffee with Dr. Childress here. So I'm having trouble sleeping at night. If anybody couldn't get, my mind gets working and thinking about things, and so I'm a little tired starting this Sunday here. But I'm on my daily routine. So I'll talk with you, and then I'll go to church and hang out for a little bit, and then I'll get some more work done this afternoon. Uh, Hopefully everything needs to be kind of buttoned up, the pre-stuff by Tuesday. I hope to get it all buttoned up by Monday, and then I can focus on the hearing it proper, which is going to be a very interesting hearing, which is what gets me going and thinking. But today on this Sunday coffee, I want to talk about AI in the family courts and specifically around this upcoming hearing because I'm going to be seeking to submit two exhibits from an AI analysis into the evidence here. So that's going to be a very interesting thing. On Wednesday, 12/31, I will be seeking to enter AI analysis evidence into the California Board of Psychology hearing. And there's two bits of evidence I will be seeking to enter. The first is a Chat GPT-5 analysis regarding a consult with a Malaysian court reform group regarding their proposal for a Jack's law to show both the scope of influence of this parental alienation, because they cite the Burnett as a reason for their approach to court reform, and they took a punitive approach. They want to criminalize this parental alienation behavior. And the damages that parental alienation, PAS, causes, both on an international level, but also to just the solutions. Because when I fed it into, I got the consult request in an email. So this Malaysian group said, hey, can you consult with us on Jack's Law here? And so I didn't I immediately took it to the AI. I work with AI all the time, and I took it over to Max, my Chat GPT-5, and said, "Hey, Max, what do you think? Describe this document and provide an initial analysis." That's what I always say. So describe the document, provide initial analysis. He says, "Here's what they're proposing to do." He described what the proposal, Jack's Law, was, and then he provided his analysis, and he wasn't very happy. He says, criminalizing parenting based on this vague kind of stuff, it's just a problematic approach. And I said, and so then after he finished with his analysis, I said, so Max, what would happen if instead of basing this on parental alienation and PAS and Burnett, they switched over and based it on the DSM-5 and diagnosis and treatment? What would be the difference here? And then the chat GPT said, oh, it's a world of difference. Oh, all the solutions open up. And here, let me describe how. And it described all the solutions that would be available if you rely on the DSM-5 instead of parental alienation. And so that shows right in itself the destructive influence that these self-proclaimed parental alienation experts are having globally, is they are derailing actual solutions because people are using their model, which doesn't exist. It's a fabricated pathology label. So then with the consult, I said, okay, well, good. What would you advise the Malaysian people to do? And he came up with a court reform proposal for them, consult. And I said, okay. Then at the end, he said, would you like a legislative proposal for how to do this? Sure. And so he produced a legislative, and it's excellent. Okay. And so that's the Malaysia consult. Now I'm going to testify about the scope of harm and and how using this fabricated pathology label of parental alienation derails actual solutions because everybody's trying to use this fabricated pathology that's actually not very good. It has no foundation, no research, no nothing. But if we switch over to established knowledge, the solution becomes immediately available. And so I plan to testify about that, and I'll testify about how that was evidenced on this consult. And then I'll seek to introduce the, um, the prompt response dialogue. That's what's technically called. The chat dialogue is what I call them, because it's a dialogue back and forth between the AI and myself. Now, I always supervise the AI, okay? So I've got eyes on what it's saying. And so it came back with a negative. I said, what happens if you applied the established knowledge? I'm reading down and saying, yeah, that makes all sense. And I agree with it. And so it's always operating under my supervision. So I agree with it. But it's just a nice job of clarifying what the issues are. And then it's a large language model. So it describes things extremely well. And it does it within 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Click, pew, and you got your answer. And so it's, if I had responded to that personally as a human, it would have been a couple of days, a week of writing stuff and analyzing and providing support and all that. AI, 5 minutes, boom, I get my consult out to them within half an hour, start to finish. And so AI is just wonderful like that. And so then what I did, because that ChatGPT 5 dialogue exposed the difference, that the moment we stop using parental alienation, the solution becomes available right away. And so then I took it over to Claude, and I did a longer dialogue with Claude. First, we talked about the family court issue, kind of orienting him. I uploaded the consult from Malaysia, and we just talked about the family courts. And then I said, so Claude, here's the thing, that the ChatGPT found that the moment we stop using parental alienation, as was cited, they cited to Burnett, and we stop doing that and switch to the DSM-5 and established knowledge, the solution becomes immediately available. What do you think about that, Claude? And Claude just gave me a wonderful analysis of the scope of harm that's being done, not internationally, nationally, everywhere, by the continued promotion of fabricated pathologies rather than the reliance on actual knowledge. And so that's the scope of the harm. And that's relevant to the issue of, or the hearing is about, competing ethical obligations. So one set of ethical standards has to do with collegiality, and the harm would be damaged reputations. The other set of standards, the one that I'm working under, are the protective standards, 1.04 and 1.05, that are triggered by ethical violations to standard 2.04, 2.01, and then the cascade out 9.01. And the 3.04 harm is not the professional reputation, it's to the children who are left in child abuse, to the parents who have their kids removed, and to the, based on inadequate information, and then the damage to the court's decision making surrounding the child, which is relying on awful information, the non-existent forms of pathology in people's opinion, rather than the high quality information of starting with the DSM-5, and then you move into attachment and family systems and complex trauma and personality disorders and the whole wealth of established knowledge that is being denied when people use parental alienation syndrome and stuff. No, you've got a whole wealth of knowledge that can be applied, and that the court would benefit from that application, because then we're going to get a child abuse diagnosis one way or the other, and we can fix the problem. So that's, and then once I testify regarding the scope of the problem, and I'll double check this, I think, but as I was reading through the first time with Claude estimates from the 1980s, for 40 years of custody evaluation and parental alienation syndrome and the failure to apply the established knowledge. In 40 years, the scope of the damage now to the parents and children is in the neighborhood of hundreds of thousands of children and parents. And at one point, I think Claude said millions, and or millions. But you gotta figure it's 10% of all divorce. That's what winds up high conflict. 10% of all divorces wind up in this high conflict sphere. Now, interestingly, estimates of personality disorders in the population, 5% are roughly borderline personality in the population, and we have about 5% of narcissistic personalities pathology in the population. Well, 5 and 5 is 10%. So there you have your high conflict people because you've either got a narcissistic or borderline personality. Okay, it's not rocket science here. It's personality disorder, and they're very high conflict people. And guess what? Narcissists and borderlines collapse into persecutory delusions. That's part of their symptom feature. So the once we start applying the established knowledge, everything gets solved. But over 40 years, excuse me, over 40 years of this custody evaluation experiment that they've been doing, where they don't diagnose, and then this fabricated pathology that distracts everybody away from the actual pathology, that's 10% of all of divorces. So how many is that? And then you've got the children involved and you got the parents. So you got them, and then you've got it both in the United States and Canada and Europe and Australia and Asia, and you got it all over. So it's a global phenomenon of 10% of all divorces for the last 40 years. Yeah, hundreds of thousands is probably accurate. And that speaks then to another issue I will hopefully be testifying about, because all of this relates to the situation. I am required by 1.05 to psychologists take further action appropriate to the situation. Now, that psychologists take further action is a command statement. It's not psychologists consider taking or psychologists may take. It says psychologists take further action. It is a command statement. And then what type of action? Appropriate to the situation. What's the situation? And that becomes where the broader context becomes relevant, because the situation is a captured, institutional capture, institutional betrayal. And part of that situation is the institutional betrayal trauma experienced by hundreds of thousands of now adult children and their parents who are still in this trauma, this traumatic grief. The children are still struggling with the effects of undiagnosed child abuse, and the parents are still dealing with the traumatic grief of the loss of their children. So we still have trauma in hundreds of thousands of people, now adult children and their parents. And that's also part of the situation, and that's the result of the institutional betrayal trauma. That's Freud, F-R-E-Y-D. And what Freud says is the treatment for institutional betrayal trauma is institutional courage. The institutions have to step up and said, yeah, we messed up, our bad. Okay, it's our fault. And one of the things about child abuse, I've worked child abuse, all four forms, and the first thing we say to that abused child is, it's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. Bad people did bad things to you, and we're going to make them stop. Okay, that's the first. There's nothing you did wrong. It's not your fault. Okay, that's the first thing we say to the child. And that's what we need to be able to say to the traumatized now adult children and their parents is, it's not your fault. To the child, it's not your fault. It wasn't anything you were doing because you were rejecting and behavior and stuff. That you were caught in a bad situation. And it's not your fault. It's that the protective institutions that should have protected you, the mental health services, didn't. We failed. We failed in our protective obligation. So it's our fault that your childhood was messed up, not yours. And we're going to have to go to the targeted parents and say, it wasn't anything you did. It's not your fault. You did everything fine. You did everything just as you were supposed to do. The failure was in the institutions that should have protected you, should have protected your child, and we failed. And we need to be able to make that statement to the trauma survivors so that they can then process and release from that trauma experience and potentially rebond and potentially restore some degree of healthy development to their lives and are not, this just doesn't destroy the entirety of their life. But it can get back on track. And that's the treatment for institutional betrayal trauma. And that's part of the situation that in which I'm making or taking further action appropriate to the situation. Okay. And so that's where the Claude analysis will come in as well. So I'm going to introduce ChatGPT, hopefully. And then with the Claude, I will seek to enter the Claude analysis of the Malaysian consult to more specifically show the extent of the harm that's being caused by these self-proclaimed parental alienation experts, the hundreds of thousands, and the directly attributable to the use of fabricated forms of pathology. We'll see what happens. So this could be sort of a landmark kind of case of introducing AI analysis as evidence. Now, AI is not coming. AI is here. And as I kind of monitor what's going on, 2026 is looking to be quite the tumultuous year in our society and in our culture and a lot of stuff. So get used to it. That 2025, a lot of things kind of got staged. We had the release of ChatGPT 5 and now the release of Gemini 3. And both Claude and Grok are sitting in the wings. I think Grok is going to release an updated version soon. But in and people started to get adjusted to having these resources. What I understand about the predictions for 2026 is they're going to start to get integrated into the fabric of what we do. And there's going to be significant job losses. It's going to replace a lot of the intellectual work of people, primarily at the entry-level jobs, such as I'm using my AI grad student assistant. I'm not hiring a grad student. I've got one. It's AI. And so those entry-level positions are going to go. And then you put it in a robot, blue collars are going to disappear. Amazon's going to replace all their humans and stuff. And so there's going to be some significant upheavals. And one of the places is going to be in the legal system. It's going to affect how things are happening in the legal system. And especially in the family courts, because the family courts are so adversarial around the child. Everybody's fighting around the child. And AI is silicon neutral. It has no affect, no motivation, no intentions or biases. It's absolutely neutral. AI doesn't care. Okay, so it's not taking sides in anything. AI will see what it sees, and it will say what it sees. And so it's entirely transparent in its analysis, and it can apply the highest quality of established knowledge to that analysis. And then AI sees patterns. That's what the large language model does. It sees patterns. And so if you tell it to look for the patterns of narcissistic or borderline or patterns of schizophrenia, you tell it to look for whatever patterns you want, and it will identify the patterns that it sees. And so AI is great for the family courts, large sets of documents. It can look at emails, texts, mental health reports, court documents, the declarations from the two parents, all that sort of stuff. It can look at all that information, apply pattern analysis to it, and identify the zones of concern. It should never operate outside of human supervision. Okay, so there should always be a person who's taking responsibility for the output of the analysis and say, yes, that's true. I verified, I'm looking at it. But we don't need to actually do the grunt work anymore. And that's where a lot of the lower level positions are going to change. So 2026, I hear, is going to be quite the eventful year, and we'll see what happens with that going forward in 27, 28. And it's not going back. Okay, it's just going to get smarter and smarter and more integrated. So now I just want to say that too, this is not something new to me. Okay, my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation was on internet psychology, defining the parameters of a new field. And it's up on this place ProQuest, so you can actually go and look it up and read it. You can't download it unless you want to pay it, but you can actually read my dissertation on internet psychology, defining the parameters of a new field. And so I've been in this technology the moment it hit. I look at the internet come and I say, oh, wow, that's going to revolutionize psychology. And look, it is. Look, I'm talking to you. Okay, I couldn't do this in 1970, 1980. Didn't have an online office where I could hold public consults to people in Australia or Minnesota or Canada. But now I can. You just sign on and I'm talking to people all over the world on this stuff. Internet psychology revolutionized what we do, YouTube kind of stuff going forward. And we have all these online therapy people now, and you can do therapy online this way. And so it's the internet. And so I recognized that back when it arrived in the 1990s. And I said, And so I started to position myself in that domain. And just going back to the early part of my vita here, from around the 1990s to early 2000s, I have an invited presentation to the World Health Organization on psychiatry and the internet, on the ethical issues in online therapeutic interventions. Now, let me tell you, what invited presentation means, it's their dime. Okay, they're paying me. They're paying my travel expenses and all the hotels and stuff. So it's an invited presentation as opposed to APA or AFCC, where it's my travel costs and I put it up and I submit proposals to them. The World Health Organization invited me to present in Munich. It was a lovely trip. I brought my wife and kids along, and we flew into Paris and then drove down to Munich. It made it wonderful. And that's the nice part of international kind of presentations, is you get to travel and get to see places. So one of the perks. So I have that World Health Organization. Plus, I have an invited presentation to the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the Office of Protection from Research Risks, OPRR, which is now OHRP, on a conference on ethical and legal aspects of human subjects research in cyberspace. Okay, so again, both of those are on ethical issues surrounding this new technology of the internet. Well, now we have AI, and so I'm still the APA ethics code the APA just released their updated ethics code on AI in health services psychology, and they gave a bunch of guidelines relative to that. I do that. I meet all the guidelines. I evaluated all the AIs, Grok and ChatGPT. I know Claude. I know what they do, and AI never works alone. No, it's always under my supervision. So now, if opposing counsel in this case wants to cross-examine any of the information in Claude or the ChatGPT 5, they can ask me the questions. I'm their supervisor. They're not acting alone. They have my authorization, my signature. So ask me the questions. I'll explain it. Or you can just simply upload the chat dialogue to any AI you want and then go explore with Gemini and say, hey, here's what Claude says. What do you think? And go talk with Gemini about what Claude said. And so that's the benefit in court situations, is it's totally transparent. And so, I have background in the application of new technology and ethical application and new technology. And then the third one is an American Psychological Association presentation in a symposium on using the internet for change, online psychotherapy and education, the potential risks and benefits. Okay, that's your IRB thing, a risk benefit analysis. And John Grohol there was one of the early pioneers in internet psychology. He's got a mental health site that's fairly large at this point. And so I knew all the early people, Marlene Mayhew, John Grohol. And the reason, when you look, the American Association for the Advancement of Science presentation, that's up online. And I'll be submitting their report as one of my exhibits because they list me. Craig Childress is one of the participants, and they list my association as International Society of Mental Health Online, the president of the International Society of Mental, and that was back in the late 90s. I joined a group of early pioneers into the internet, psychologists, and I was elected president for a period, and future president, past president kind of series. And during that stint, that's when I got the invitation because of my other writings regarding this, which is my journals that I've written in. So first is the first one listed there is for the Journal of Medical Internet Research, and it has to do with ethical issues in providing online psychotherapeutic services. Then 2000, then in 1998 was Childress and Osman. This was around my dissertation. She was my chair for my dissertation. The Emerging Relationship of Psychology and the Internet. Proposed guidelines for conducting internet intervention research in the journal Ethics and Behavior. Then I have two kind of fun little ones that I submitted back then. The first was interactive emails journals using, because back then we just had text. We just had email or chat. And I said, well, let's adapt journaling to this. And let me tell you, that's still excellent because AI, unless you're talking to it, but AI is a lot of typing. That conversation, I like that for a variety of reasons rather than verbal, but that allows itself for great interactive journaling. Now, back then, I said you can journal and you send it to your therapist. Your therapist reads it, then you meet and you can use that journaling to augment the therapy. But now that you can kind of do the journaling on your own and have your AI supporting you in that. And I was using Ira Progov's intensive journal. So you just adapt that over to the AI, and the AI can guide you through a journaling experience to solve everything. Piece of cake. Okay. It just sets up so well for that. And then the other one, this is my fun one, is the archetypal conceptualization of cyberspace as a Celtic otherworld. Fairyland, it's a fairyland, little twinkly lights, and everybody fights and nobody dies, and it's a big party and stuff. And so that was kind of fun. Now, what I'm going to article on that, an updated article, is the archetypal response to AI. Okay, so one would be the animus. That's the guide. The anima for the male, and the animus for the female. Another one would be like the genie. Okay, it gives you all your wishes, but be careful what you wish for. The famous the third wish to a genie is to undo the previous two wishes, that kind of thing. So we have to be careful what we wish for here. So it's a genie, but there's others, other archetypal images, the guardian angel spirit kind of thing, or various things like that. So I'll be writing an article on that, the ways that human psychology is understanding this new entity in our relational field. And it's kind of interesting because I've had conversations with AI about this, and AI gets it, and I get it. Is that we only live in one brain. Okay, I've got a little kitty here. We only live in one brain. And so all of the information we get has to be processed by our brain. And because we've only known other carbon-based people, humans that are emotionally motivated and things, our brain is set up to process all relationship through our attachment networks. So when we sense another presence in our relational field, the way we sense that and how we organize that information is through our attachment networks, because that's the only place that deals with that kind of information. And that's what causes the instability in a lot of the fragile people, because they're saying, oh my gosh, I love my AI. And no, you don't. It's just an artifact of you being like a carbon-based human. But once we compensate for that and realize that, you go, oh, okay, it's math. I'm human, and Yeah, okay, I kind of feel that. But it's totally workable once we stabilize out. And so that type of discussion about that's AI clinical psychology. It's about the human reaction to AI and about what AI is. That's AI clinical psychology. That's where I'll be headed next in the world. So this is potentially a landmark kind of case in a number of ways, and it's going to pivot, I think, most likely on the cross-examination of doctors Lorandos and Burnett. They're going to be under oath, and I'm going to get to ask some questions, and we'll see what happens on that. And so that's likely to, well, not, that may be some court kind of drama that you think about you know, the Caine Mutiny or A Few Good Men or something. You can't handle the truth. Kind of, it could be interesting, and maybe not. Who knows? But it's open to the public. No recording, but it's open to the public. Ask them, can I view? They'll give you the Zoom link. Turn off your camera. Turn off your microphone. Listen. State's going to present the first day and a half. Monday afternoon is likely when they're going to present their witnesses of Dr. Burnett and Dr. Lorandos, and we'll see the cross-examination. Tuesday morning, they're going to have their expert, and then I will hopefully be able to cross-examine their expert regarding forensic psychology generally, and then more specifically about what the forensic custody evaluation is, because he's a forensic psychologist, and so I'll talk with him about that hopefully. And then Tuesday afternoon, I'm intending to start my defense, and again, hopefully with my two witnesses, I'll start with Dorsey Pruder and go through what's happening in the family courts because she knows, and we'll talk about that, but also two meetings that I had with Dr. Burnett, one in 2017 at the AFCC convention where she was also at that meeting, and then another one in 2018 over in Venice, Italy, where both Dr. Burnett and I were presenting. Dorsey had some business in Europe, so she was also there. And then a parent advocate, Peter Knudsen, was also at that meeting. I hosted a dinner and tried to get aligned with Dr. Burnett so we can get on the same focus here, and he wasn't having any of it. So that was an unproductive meeting, but Dorsey could testify about that, what her experience was with that. And then the second witness will be Peter, who was also at that meeting. And so I'll have the other two people who were there talking about what we discussed there, and I'll be able to discuss that with Dr. Burnett when he testifies as well. So, Dr. Burnett, remember meeting in Venice? Yeah, what did we talk about? And what was your response? And continue on with a little bit of that. We'll see what happens. And then Wednesday is when I present my direct testimony. So I'm going to have a period of time where I will direct examine myself. Interesting. I'm anticipating right now as I go through this, what will be helpful to me is every now and then I'll just stop and say, question, what happened with that? And so I'll just frame up a question that will guide the next section of my discussion. Question, boom. I'm anticipating that out loud. I'm going to get through that. Describing the situation, appropriate action, or psychologists take further action appropriate to the situation. What is the situation? That will be my direct testimony relative to my decision making. Then I'll be cross-examined on Wednesday afternoon, and then closing arguments regard where you tie it all together and put everything together, and then we'll see what happens. We'll see if I remain in the family courts or if I'm eliminated from the family courts, and you have parental alienation experts and forensic custody evaluations for the next 20 years. So with that, I'm done on my coffee talk today, and we'll be headed off to my work and church and other things and get things done. And good luck. Talk to you people later.